I'm Jeremy Lazarus. Welcome to this video on taking control of your time. Now, if you're like most people I've come across since 1999, since I've been coaching and training people, you're being asked to do more with less time. You're busy in your life, you're probably busy at work, you probably don't have enough time to do the things that you want to do, both in your life and your work, and in some ways that's probably holding you back from being as successful as you'd like to be at work, and maybe it's causing you a bit of stress in your life. I'm going to take you through in this video an exercise that I use with many of my executive coaching clients and quite a lot of people on my training courses, and I think without exception they all find it incredibly valuable. In order to do this, you're going to need a couple of bits of paper, a pen, and probably a calculator or mobile phone to do some simple adding up. And as we go through, I'm going to ask you to pause the video from time to time just to do the little exercises that that we're going to cover on this video. So I'm going to ask you to pause the video now, get yourself some paper and pen and a mobile phone or calculator, and then press play when you're ready to get going. Okay, let's make a start. Please could you take one of the pieces of paper and divide it into 5 columns, and you see on the screen the sort of dimensions. So the first column is going to cover almost half the page, and then there's going to be a couple of columns, or probably 3 columns actually, relatively narrow, and then the final column is going to have a bit more space. And if you label those columns 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. So just take a moment to do that, please. So once you've done that, if you could take a few moments then to just put a title at the top of each of the columns. Activity column 1, column 2 is current, column 3 is ideal, column 4 plus stroke minus, and column 5 is action. So what is all this about? Well, if you think about it, every single person on the planet, whether they're in charge of major corporations or whether they're prime ministers or presidents or whether they're unemployed, all of us have 168 hours in a week, 7 times 24, 168. And in my experience, the people who use those 168 hours most effectively are the ones who are most, inverted commas, successful, whether that's successful in a sort of financial career sense or whether they're just fulfilled in their life because they're doing the things that are really important to them. So we're going to do an exercise which is going to look at how you spend your time, the different activities you do in your week, how you spend your time, and what you could change in order to be even more fulfilled. And once we've done this exercise, we're going to do the same exercise or similar exercise in your workplace. So let's start off with your life generally. So in the first column there, under activity, please make a note of all the key activities that you do in a typical week. Now I know for some people, no 2 weeks are the same. I'm going to ask you to just to look at a reasonably typical week. What are the activities? And please be reasonably thorough here. So obviously things like sleep, and for many of you work, perhaps travel, time with family, friends, maybe the gym or some kind of sporting activity or exercise. There'll be chilling out and maybe doing hobbies. Excuse me. So make a list of all of the key activities that you do in any typical week. Take a few moments to do that now, please. Okay, and what I'm also going to ask you to do is at the bottom to add the word miscellaneous. I'm going to call that another activity if you like. It's like a catch-all, so miscellaneous or unaccounted for. And then in column 2, the current column, I'm going to ask you to list out how much time, so how many hours a week you spend doing each of those activities. So for example, if you spend, let's say 6 hours a night sleeping, that's 6 7 42 hours. If you spend 10 hours a week, 5 days a week, that's 50 hours, etc., etc. So go through, please, making a note of how many hours you spend typically doing each of those activities. And when you've done that, please add up those numbers, and it should come to 168. You may want to allow yourself up to maybe 5 hours or so for unaccounted or miscellaneous time. Now, some people, when they add them up, they find that, oh my goodness, there's 200 hours. How do I cram in so much into my week? Many people find, hang on a minute, this is only 120, 130, 140 hours. What do I actually do with my time? Take a few moments, add up the numbers, and it may be that you need to adjust some of the numbers or add a couple of additional categories in for things like maybe just chilling out or watching TV or something like that. So make sure that that second column adds up to 168 hours, please. And now we're going to cover column 3, how you would ideally like to spend your time. Now, please do it given your current set of circumstances and not making an assumption you're going to win the lottery tomorrow. So ideally, how would you like to spend your time? So if, for example, you'd like ideally to spend 7 hours a night sleeping, you'd write 49, 7's 49. If you'd ideally like to spend only 40 hours a week working, you'd write 40, etc., etc. So do that, please, and make sure that that column adds up to 168 hours. So here you are, you've got the activity, you know how much time you currently spend and how much you'd ideally like to spend. So in column 4, can you please do a bit of simple adding up or taking away what needs to change? What activity needs to increase or decrease? So for example, if you currently spend 42 hours a week sleeping and you'd like to spend 49, you're going to write +7. If you currently spend 50 hours a week working and you'd like to spend 40, let's say, you'd write -10. You go through all the pluses and minuses, and of course, the total should equal 0. Take a few moments to do that, please. So the final column really is just action. So what are you actually going to do to make the changes? Now, my tip for you would be, rather than necessarily looking to make changes with every single category in one go, maybe pick 2 or 3 of them, and perhaps some of the important ones or some of the ones that are going to make a big difference. So it could be, for example, if you want to spend an extra hour a night sleeping, maybe you make a point of going to bed an hour earlier, or that you go to bed half an hour earlier and get up half an hour later. So you know your life, what are some of the changes you need to make? You might also want to look at perhaps some of the smaller numbers that would make a big difference. So for example, maybe just an extra hour or 2 a week of quality time with your partner or your kids, perhaps that would make a big difference for you personally and the people in your life. Or maybe just spending a couple of hours extra in the gym would make a big difference. So make a note of probably 3, 4, maybe 5 actions that you are going to take, and things you can actually do within the next week or so. So rather than stuff that's going to take months and months to put into place, take some action now. Make a list of things that you can actually do in the short term to get the ball rolling. Take a few moments to do that, please. Okay, the final thing really for me to say in this particular section is, given you've got some actions, actually there's 2 things I want to say. Firstly, it may be that you need some help or support or assistance from people in your life, maybe your partner or your friends or your colleagues at work. You may need some support from them to help you to actually do that, certainly in the short term, just so it becomes a habit. If that's the case, make those requests, ask those people. The second thing, the most important thing, is just to do it, to make a promise to yourself to make the changes that are going to support you in being, doing and having more of what you want to be, do and have. So make the changes to be more fulfilled in life. So that's looking at how you can take control of your time in your life generally. We're going to do the same sort of exercise with taking control of your time at work. So with the second piece of paper, I'm going to ask you to do exactly the same in terms of making dividing the sheet into 5 columns: activity, current, ideal, plus or minus, and action. And when you've done that, you're going to, in the activity column, write down the key activities or the key uses of your time in the workplace. So it could be, if you work in an office, it might be there's be some time spent in meetings, it could be answering emails, it could be dealing with customers or suppliers or clients or colleagues, it could be managing staff if you're a line manager. Make a list of the key things that you do each week in the workplace. And as you've done before, in column 2, make a list of how much time you currently spend doing each of those activities. Now you may need to look at the overall numbers from the first exercise. So if you currently spend, let's say, 50 hours a week working, the current total should equal 50 hours. So take a few moments with that, please. And when you've done that, look at the ideal column, same as you did last time. Make a list or make a note of how many hours you would ideally spend doing each of those activities. Bearing in mind, of course, that if you wanted to reduce from 50 hours to, let's say, 40 hours, in the ideal column you'd put 40. It may, of course, be that the 40 hours is a long-term ideal, so in the short term, maybe 45 hours would be okay. So how would you ideally spend your time at work? How many hours doing each of those activities? Okay, fourth column, you know what to do. Make a note of the pluses and minuses. The only difference from the previous exercise is that the total will be the difference between the overall number of hours that you currently spend and how you'd like to spend. So if it was 50 and 40, it would be minus 10. That would be the total of the pluses and minuses would be minus 10 in that example. You know what to do now. Column 5, what are the actions you're going to take? Let me give you an example of how this actually works in practice. I was coaching a lady many years ago who was the chief exec of an entertainment business, and something like 65 to 70% of the profits of that business came from about 10 clients, and they had hundreds of clients. And I said to her, how much time ideally would you be spending on those 10 clients? And she said something like 40 to 45%, let's say 40%. And I said to her, how much time do you currently spend on them? And she said probably about 15, maybe 20%. So you can imagine what the coaching involved. It was, we discussed how she could increase from 20% of her time to 40% of her time with those major customers. What she would need to change, what she would perhaps need to delegate or stop doing, or perhaps defer or do more effectively. Within the space of a year, that organization had made more profits than it had made in any of the previous years, and the following year from that it made even higher profits. So for 2 consecutive years there were record profits. Well, I'm not going to say purely because of this. I would say a key factor was the chief executive was really focused on the essential key tasks that she needed to do to make her business really be successful. So I don't know how that may apply to you in your career. Maybe you're not the chief executive and you're the chief executive of yourself. You're the chief executive of your career. So what are you going to do so that you can be more effective at work? If you'd like to find out more, then click the link that you'll find in the description below this video. Please remember to subscribe so you'll always be the first to see new videos. And also, please like this video so it'll be easy for others to find this information too.